friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kat and today I'm doing my August wrap-up part 2. So, in the month of August, I read 29 books. I covered 9 of those books in my August wrap-up part 1, so I will go ahead and leave that linked down below. 5 are going to be in my romance wrap-up, which I'm going to film right after this, and then 2 are in a secret mini burst, so I'm not going to talk about them in this wrap-up, but you'll see it in the next month when I finish the 3rd book. So today for my August wrap-up part 2, I have 13 books to talk about. So I did just finish the live show with Jordaline, and it was so great to talk to you guys. The live show was absolutely amazing. If you haven't already seen it, I highly recommend watching it. It is just so fun, and we talk about the graveyard apartment in as much detail as you can go into with it. We talk about all the books that we read for the prompts, and we also just talked about a lot of other shit as well. So we had a fabulous time. Thank you to everyone who came out. It was honestly amazing. There were so many of you. Just like completely boggles my mind how many people were staying up late to like watch, and it was just lovely, and we had a great time having pizza together. So all the books that I talked at length about in the live show, I'm just going to give you like the name of it and what I rated it, because we have so many books to talk about today. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get into it. So the first one on this list is The Graveyard Apartment, which I gave 2 stars. This is not shocking to anyone who was in the live show. Jordaline and I both gave it 2 stars. It wasn't really our jam. I really don't recommend it. There's a lot better Japanese books out there. Yeah, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. Next up is Toddler-Hunting. This I also gave 2 stars, and this one I unrecommend because this was one of the books I was most excited for the Read a Translated Book prompt, and written by women prompt and vintage prompt, and this was not it. This was not it. It had a lot of misogyny and domestic abuse, which is common in some older books, but then there was one specific short story in here that just had like gross use of ableism, and I'm not here for it, and I don't recommend this. I unrecommend this. Next up, we have a book that I read because of Scallywagathon, and I had heard you guys talk about it so much, and that the ending was just gonna blow my mind. However, I wasn't that thrilled, and I gave it 2.5 stars. So the majority of this novel is about a girlfriend and a boyfriend who are traveling in the car to go meet the boyfriend's parents for the first time. The majority of it takes place in the car, and she is reminiscing on their times together while she is thinking of ending things with him. And honestly, a lot of the car driving sequences I found a bit pretentious and boring, and then by the time they get to the house and certain things start to happen, I kind of guessed what the twist was, so that by the end I really didn't care that much. I know that sounds really bad, but I'll definitely be watching the TV series that's coming out soon. It looks really creepy. The book just didn't do it for me though. I wonder if it would have been better on audio. So next up I have The Ruin by Dervla McTiernan. This is set in Galway in 1993 when a young investigator is called to a house to sort through a domestic situation. However, when he turns up, the mother is dead from a drug overdose, and the 2 children are alone in this creepy, damp house. And he helps them get to safety, and while the little boy is in the hospital, the older girl runs away, and it isn't until many, many years later when he's working on another case that his old case and this new case of a suicide might have something in common. So this definitely kind of got me interested and kept my reading fast. However, I think I failed to connect with the main detective. So that's why this got 3.5 stars for me. I felt a little bit disconnected from the main detective, but I have heard that the second one in this series, called The Scholar, is even better. Like, it has obscenely high ratings on Goodreads, and it follows the same detective. So I'm thinking I might get the second one, because if it's good, I want to give these to my dad. He really loves to read mystery thrillers with like detectives in Europe. That's very, very niche, but so I think that if the second one is amazing, he might really like these. So if you've read the second one, let me know your thoughts down below. So another 3.5 star is Frankenstein by Junji Ito. This is obviously a Frankenstein retelling. I gave this 3.5 stars because the art style is gruesome and hideous. So I do love that about it. However, I think that Junji Ito focuses a lot on the illustrations and not as much time on building like characters. So this is what the illustration of Frankenstein's monster looks like. So it is really creepy. And like, yes, the illustrations in here did kind of give me like a little bit of a nightmare. Like when I was falling asleep, I just saw that face and was like, ugh, ugh. So 3.5 stars. If you like Junji Ito, I recommend it. If you're looking for a Frankenstein retelling, there are better ones out there. If you're looking for specifically a graphic illustrated Frankenstein retelling, Gris did an awesome one, which I read last year. It's very cool. His art style is very like kind of Nightmare Before Christmassy, if that makes sense, but it was very good. So if I was going to choose between these, I would definitely choose that one. Also because the characters are more developed. Another 3.5 star I have is Little Eyes by Samanta Schweblin, who is an Argentinian author. And this I really, really gelled with. This is following a world where there are these little things called Kentuckys. Picture like Furbies that have cameras in the eyes and little wheels that can move around. And you can choose to either be watched or watch someone else. And this is kind of an exploration of what the world would look like if these things existed. So each chapter follows different people. Sometimes you meet those people again later, sometimes you don't. But I think it was a really interesting thought experiment. I think some of the chapters were stronger than others, some were weaker. So that's ultimately why I got 3.5 stars, but Samanta Schweblin is definitely someone I'm going to be reading more from in the future. Okay, now we're getting into my 4 stars. I had so many good books 4 and above. So first I want to talk about a thriller. This is If You Knew Her by Emily Elgar. This was really good because we're following a young woman who is hit by someone and her body falls into a nearby creek and she's brought to the hospital where she lies in a coma. So while she's in a coma, the person that is also in the room is a man who has been paralyzed, and it's kind of locked in syndrome where he can't even move like his eyelids and he can't communicate, but he can watch everything that's happening. And he realizes that the woman in a coma is in like grave danger. So you're alternating between the nurse who works on the ward, who's taking care of both of them, and the man who is paralyzed and can't do anything about what he knows. And it's so good. And there were a few scenes in this that were just so scary, like from his point of view, because he's totally at the mercy of other people. I'm not gonna say anything else, but like this was really good and I like sped through it. I ate it up so fast because I was like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Like I was really on the edge of my seat because it was such a unique premise too, and also how the nurse, like for instance, like if she missed the tiniest little thing, she has so many patients to deal with, and like so many, just like the littlest moment could like mean life or death, and I was just like, what's gonna happen? So if you're looking for a thriller and that sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend this. It was really good, really, really good. But I have to say my favorite thriller of the month was Ghost Girls by Cath Ferla. This was such a pleasant surprise. I got it at a used bookstore for $3 and it was so good. So we're following an ESL teacher in Sydney, Australia, and one day she's teaching and then one of the students she's teaching jumps out the window and commits suicide. And when she goes downstairs to see which of her students it was, people are telling her that it was a student, but like when she looks at the body, she's like, that's not that student. And everyone's like, yeah, it is, that's what her name is. And she's like, no, I've been teaching that woman for months. I know what she looks like. So she realizes that there are these ghost girls where in order to keep their visas, girls will pay other girls to substitute into the ESL classes for them while they go and work elsewhere, such as in serving or working in a hostess bar or even prostitution. So as she starts to delve deeper into this string of missing girls who have come to Australia for visa purposes and English learning purposes, but then they seem to be missing, it gets darker and darker. And another area where this was so interesting was that the author has like a love of Chinese food, specifically food from the Sichuan province that features ginger, chili, and garlic. This book was making me salivate as I was reading it because she just describes the different ways of preparing food and honoring people with food and like family ties and food. And like, I was just, oh my God, I wanted Chinese food. It sounded so good and it was making my mouth water. This book was so good. Like the end was so good. I didn't know what was happening. It was so well done. I don't know why more people aren't talking about this. Like this is such a freaking hidden gem. Like, so if that sounds at all interesting to you, I highly recommend. Just know that there's a lot of triggers for like everything having to do with the sex trade. Yeah, just know that it gets really dark that way. So I really recommend this. This is such a random hidden gem find, and I'm just like fucking thrilled that I read it. So next up is one that I read again for Scallywagathon, and this is Follow Me to Ground. And it was so good. So I believe she's also an Irish writer as well. And this is following a main character who is not quite human. So her and her father are different. They were basically produced by this magical, weird ground which produced them. So they have the ability to cure humans of ailments. They dig their hands inside their bodies and like pull them apart and reach in and get sicknesses out or like tumors out, and then they can plant the humans in that ground and it kind of heals them, and then they bring them back up and send them on their way, and that's kind of how they make their living. But they're both really long-lived beings, and we're following a main character who is quite older than she looks. She looks quite young, but she has been alive for a long time, and she starts up this relationship with a local young man, and things are dark and weird and creepy. And I'm not gonna say anything else because I don't wanna ruin anything, but there are definitely triggers in here, so please look at reviews if you're someone who's triggered by things. I don't wanna say anything because it would give stuff away, but I really enjoyed this book. It's the kind of book where when I finished it, I was like, what? I don't know how I feel about that. And then now that I've sat with it longer, I'm like, ah, yes, I do think I liked you. It's very similar to how I felt about Under the Skin by Michelle Faber. At first I was like, what the fuck was that? And then I was like, ah, yes, I see, and I like what happened here. So I highly recommend that if that sounds like your cup of tea. Next up, let's talk about A Taste of Honey by Ashante Wilson. So this was very interesting, weird, and different. So this is set in an Afrocentric country. It's unnamed really, but it's a fantasy world where gods can intermingle with humans. And we're following a main character who is a master of beasts. He takes care of the beasts at the kind of royal castle, and he meets a soldier who is from a neighboring kingdom who decides to like strike up a love affair with him. And it's about their story, but also not. So this book really threw me for a loop because I thought that that's what it was going to be about. However, this book is a dual timeline. So one timeline is like the present, and it's going through the 10 days that they're together. And then the other timeline skips into the future. So you're seeing things that happen, and it made me both frustrated and really like melancholy and anxious for what was happening in the current time. and the ending made everything worth it. So before the ending, this was gonna be like a 3.5 because I was mad at some of the things that were happening, and also you're kind of just dropped into this world. It's not fully explained, so if you need to know everything about the world and how the magic system works, this might not be for you, but I just like went with the flow, hoping it would like come together at the end. And while nothing more about the world was totally revealed, I really loved the ending, so it brought it up to a 4 for me. And if that sounds interesting to you, this is the second in Wilson's series kind of set in this world. The first one is A Sorcerer of Wild Deeps, which tore to celebrate their 5th birthday. They just made that book free, I think September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So if you go to the link on their Insta, you can download it in your email, just saying free book. I downloaded mine because this one was so interesting and unique that I want to read the first one. Okay, and next up I have 2 4+ novels. That means like they're a 4, but they're like a high 4. This is Elizabeth by Ken Greenhall. So the more that I've thought about this, the more that I really liked it. So we're following Elizabeth, who is 12 years old when her parents die, and she goes to live with her grandmother and her aunt and uncle. Now, she is 14 years old, but she's been having relations with her uncle for quite a while, and around the same time when she moves to her grandmother's house, she starts to see someone who's an ancestor of hers who was a witch in her mirror, and she starts to communicate with her and basically kind of struggle with newfound power and family dynamics. But Alicia Reads brought up a very good point that if you view this through a different lens, all of the witchcraft and all of the dark, creepy things that happen, which there are a lot, familiars, snakes, cats, toads, shattered mirrors, blood, death, murder, there's a lot. If you view it through the lens of a young person who has suffered sexual, physical, mental trauma, then this book takes on a whole nother level of meaning, and it makes me really love it more. So I really do recommend this, but it has triggers for pedophilia, incest, sexual assault, and like gaslighting, I think. So, oh, yeah, there's like so many triggers, so please be careful if you're gonna read this, but I think that this is the novel which will grow in my ratings over time, if that makes sense. So I really fucked with this and I really liked it. So my other 4+ read was Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, which is a book that you guys voted for Scallywagathon. And I'm so glad I read it. It was so good. You guys should read it. Pick it up right now. So we're following the life of Kim Jiyoung, who's born in 1982, like it says, and it just documents her life and like all the ways that basically society in South Korea is very patriarchal and very set against women. And I think that I connected with this a lot because, if you guys don't know, I lived in Korea for 2 years where I worked, and one of the reasons that we moved away was actually sexual harassment at work. So like some of the elements in here were just making me furious. Like I would stop reading and I would turn to my husband and I would be like, do you remember when that happened? Like I blocked that from my memory because I was like, I never want to think about that again. And then this book made me feel all the things again. So I think it's incredibly important, and I understand why people, probably men, are furious in Korea that this is even out. Just Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, was amazing, and it made me absolutely furious, to be honest. I was livid. And my favorite book of the month actually turned out to be one I read thinking it would be a romance, but it actually turned out to be an extremely well-written fantasy. So this is Radiance by Grace Draven, which I never thought that I would say this, but it was so good. So I actually decided to pick this up immediately when I heard Mina from Mina Reads talk about it. She was saying it's the best meet cute she's ever seen because the meet cute is more like a meat roast where they meet each other but they don't know who the other one is and they're just insulting the shit out of one another, like really bad. Because in this world, the main character who's a woman is human and she has like long red hair, she's super pale, all, you know, to the human's eyes, she's beautiful. But the main character is another type of being that they're like night walkers where like his skin is gray and he has like yellow eyes that have like no pupils and like dark black hair and long black talons. And in his world, in his people, he is extremely handsome. But when they are put in an arranged marriage to like put their kingdoms together, they think the other one is like the fucking ugliest thing ever. But even though they're in an arranged marriage, they are so respectful of each other because they're truly trying to keep their kingdoms from like feuding and doing the best to like make the best of the situation. And so as their bond grows, they realize that the other person has so many good elements in them that it was just so great. It's like a romance that is built on like a negative meet cute and respect and friendship way before there is any sort of tension or sexual chemistry at all. Like, so that's why I ended up actually putting this in my regular wrap up rather than in the romance, because I don't even think there's romance until like maybe the last 20% of the book. So like for most of it, it's just like a really good fantasy world where like it's really cool. And I read it in one sitting. I stayed up all night to finish this book. I stayed up till 4 a.m. I was reading next to my husband. I just like couldn't sleep. Like I needed to know what was gonna happen. I will be reading the sequel sometime soon. So if that sounds at all up your alley, I highly recommend it. I had an absolutely fab time reading it and I gave it 4.5 shiny stars. So that is the end of this wrap up. I read a lot. I had a great time. I loved talking to you all and I just loved reading all the books. If you made it this far, leave a ghost emoji down below for Ghost Girls because this was just the hidden gem, I think. A lot of the books in this list I had high hopes for, but this one I went in with no expectations and it was amazing. So I will catch you guys in another video soon. I'm going to film my romance one next. And I thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fab day. Lots of love. Bye!